Well, hello there and welcome to the kitchen of the dollhouse for another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Joost Elvers for April 22nd, the day of established presence. That's right. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of established presence. We have what appears to be, what is it? Boom. It's a hard-boiled egg atop an anvil. That's right. I would say that's an established presence because typically things get pounded on anvils. That's right. An egg is otherwise somewhat delicate, if you like. Oftentimes, these visual representational images, they are very rather enigmatic, or what's the representation there? Who's to say? But here I would say that's pretty interesting, all right? Not often the case we can draw some kind of correlation. That said, not altogether all too important. I just like folks to kind of know what dynamics on the page here in front of me, kind of off camera if you like. But what is important here is it's April 22nd, hence it's somebody's birthday. So if today's your birthday, I just want to say happy birthday. That's what's important. But if this video finds you late, I don't know, days, weeks, months, well, I hope you had a happy birthday in that circumstance. That said, a lot of times folks like to join us to celebrate or find out more about a loved one. And so if that's why you're here, I just want to say hello, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, before I get into the redirect, something I like to do around these here parts, and that is roll some dice. That's right. This is the Diecast birthday broadcast, so I like to live up to the namesake. But if you're not interested, hey, just skip ahead in the chapters. No big deal, all right? I'll be here rolling dice because I do so more importantly for synchronicity's sake. And here I rolled us a 1 and a 4 for a 5. All right, so what is synchronicity? You're probably wondering if you stuck around. Well, my friends, as I often hear it told, the universe, the high powers that be will oftentimes put things in our path to help us manifest our goals or realize our aspirations. But oftentimes in this life, we're rather narrow of focus. We got the blinders on to a lot of things going on around us. We're very singular in mind as we're chasing after our errands and the like. So we may be apt to miss the things the universe is putting in our path. So how do we recognize such things? Well, we need a little bit of assistance to help us identify such things. A signpost, if you like, something mutually agreed upon between us and the higher powers that be. Boom, your daily numbers, all right? So if you see the numbers, you know you're on the right path, all right? It could be a 4 and a 5, a 4 and a 1, a 1 and a 4, a 5. Who's to say? You just got to be eagle-eyed on that, on the lookout for them. That said, if this is something you want to get into the weeds with even further, get some of that synchronicity going, hey, we got to get the blinders off, all right, first and foremost. And then you get yourself a set of dice, all right? So that you're not only outside your daily numbers, you can set up time limits and directional directions to go in within those time limits, all right? Say 1 through 3 would be north, 4 through 6 would be east, and so on. You can also get even further in there for evens and odds, for yeses and nos, or lefts and rights. It's all what you establish between you and the universe or the higher powers that be. But once you've got all that figured out, pick out a place that you want to explore, a place near and dear to your heart, like the town square, and then set out. But again, get those blinders off because you never know, the day might start to take on a little bit of a theme outside your daily numbers. Or maybe it's just the theme itself. Maybe you keep running across people pounding things with hammers, all right? The way one might do an anvil, all right? Or hard-boiled eggs, all right? We're just using the visual representational image to give you an idea. That said, maybe it's not stuff in your environment. Maybe it's stuff on advertisements or in shop windows. You just keep seeing the same reoccurring theme. That's why you got to stay eagle-eyed, all right? So you can look for such things. I take that as a sign that the universe is showing you you're on the right path. But let's say you roll the dice 5, 6 times, you go in the directions it tells you, with the time limits they're saying, and hey, maybe you're not seeing much of anything. Hey, never fret, just take it all in earnest. Hey, at the very least, you're getting your steps in, you're at least putting yourself out there. That's huge, I would say, because a lot of folks aren't doing that kind of thing. But maybe no sooner you go to roll the dice one more time before you're about to give up the faith in this thing. And hey, maybe somebody stops and asks you what you're up to, all right? Hey, just let them know what's going on. Maybe tell them about me. This guy on the internet said to do this thing. See if the universe lines up for me. And you're apt to tell them it's crazy, and they're apt to tell you it's crazy too. But hey, you know what? Maybe they know somebody whose birthday is April 22nd also. And you know what? Maybe they're then apt to join you on the journey because they find it interesting. And hey, you know what? You just made a friend. Maybe the universe was lining you up to meet this individual. Because if you had given up a roll or two previous, you never would have ran into them, right? Or if you'd taken more time to kind of question the methods, they would have passed you by, right? So That's the idea, all right? And maybe as you guys are rolling on the numbers there, maybe you come to a shop that's got, what's this? Oh, it's got a 14 in the address, and you roll the dice, say, should I go in for evens, odds? Just tells you yes, you go in. Maybe it's a blacksmith shop, and maybe they've got hard-boiled eggs in a case for some reason. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing that I would say. Look at this. It's kind of magical how it's all coming together. So that's the idea of synchronicity, all right? So get out there, let the universe show it's with you on your path. See, taste, touch, smell, intuit, just a little bit of that kind of happenstance. It's the kind of thing I think is a little magical. So I think you get the point. Let's get on with the birthday reading. Your month is April. Your day is the 22nd. Your sign is 1 to 3 degrees Taurus of the Aries Taurus cusp. And your quality and element is fixed earth. All right, here we go. April 22nd, the day of established presence. April 22 people are active in setting up and establishing not only systems of ideas, but also actual physical establishments as well. To organize and supervise the running of a family, a restaurant, a school, or any other social unit is their forte. Paradoxically, they are not particularly social people at all, but more often loners. Many are quiet people who do not really like drawing attention to themselves. They know the secret of how to work hard in a relaxed way. Yet the enormous talent they have for organizing social functions of all kinds is present in them and sooner or later comes out. Even if this talent is not expressed professionally, but only in supervising family functions, giving birthday or anniversary parties from time to time, or the like, those born on this day will nonetheless find these occasions rewarding and stimulating. But it would be a waste for April 22 people not to put their talents to use in a commercial sphere as well. Sometimes their organizational skills are frustrated by the people for whom they are forced to work. For example, they may be called upon to set up and run a company owned by someone else. And after doing an excellent job, they find that the owner is overcritical or would rather have done things his or her own way. This can lead to discouragement and depression or ultimate resignation from the position. On the other side, April 22 people usually have few problems with coworkers. Those who work for them, those who work under them, respect both their powerful, down-to-earth approach and human qualities. Whether big in frame or not, their imposing physical presence is often an important reason for their success. The greatest challenge for April 22 people is to control power urges. The most advanced people born on this day are modest and humble about their abilities. And the less highly evolved can be overbearing power trippers or unkind and obscure in their manner toward others. What April 22 people should always aim for is an equitable and just use of their commanding qualities. And although they can be fascinated with money and with financial powerful people, they should not adopt wholesale the values of those they admire, but rather study their technique in order to learn from them, rejecting those methods which are inconsistent with constructive social values. Having established a family, business, or organization, an April 22 person will ask after a period of time whether it is growing, developing, or living up to his or her ideals. And because of this awareness, it can be a great challenge for April 22 people to decide whether to continue with a project along similar lines, to change it in certain important respects, or to abandon it in favor of a more rewarding and meaningful endeavor. And knowing when to quit or how to quit, it says in parentheticals, is not easy for an April 22 person and can cause them mental anguish and anxiety. It is in this that they should heed their inner voice. And in addition, it is essential that April 22 people develop their spiritual side, particularly to avoid enslavement to materialistic values. All right, a rather hyper-focused day, to be sure, on a lot of different variables, but not the most rounded out particular birthday reading I've come across, especially in so many days. I think it was just yesterday. They were talking about relationships, what they were like as children, parents, all the like. I kind of call that rounded out. Here they more kind of drilled down on certain qualities that you have and then expanded out. Not the worst thing in the world, but it's just interesting to note, because that's the kind of thing that the book can include. That said, I'd like to provide a little bit of a commentary on what we just read, kind of dive into the particulars, what I found interesting, and also kind of contrast it with days previous in the period writ large, also the book. So let's dive in, see what I had to say here. April 22nd, the day of established presence. You're said to be active in setting up systems or ideas and establishments with a specialty in the running of a family or social institutions. Despite apparently not being the most social of individuals, if they claim that you're often loners, applies. Which, if true, may owe in no small part to a dynamic that we'll discuss here shortly as we get on with reading the book. Interestingly, over the course of the past few days, the Aries Taurus Cusp individuals were experiencing quite the dynamic and paradigm shift coming out of Aries proper, which is most telling of which was a propensity to experience mental fatigue and stress, along with strong recommendations to take time to relax and to decompress from this strong drive that you possess. It's an issue by and large it's not really mentioned in the Aries period, but it is for you. So I wouldn't poo-poo the notion to take the time to relax. It's been coming up almost every day in the cusp period here, and seldom if ever for Aries individuals. They're just hard-driven doers, and they don't necessarily need a lot of rest unless there's some particular planetary dynamic that comes on one specific day. So again, just don't poo-poo the notion to take some time off. Surprisingly, the reading claims you know the secret, however, on how to work hard in a relaxed way. So maybe there's a little bit of a different dynamic for you, because this wasn't at all mentioned for any of the other days with the Aries Taurus cusp. So it sounds like you need relaxation, but you know how to do it in an active way while you're working. So hey, you know what? Huge strength if it applies. But this claim to having an intrinsic talent at organizing social functions and finding them rewarding, that's also a trait that's uniquely yours and has not been found elsewhere in the period by my recollection. That said, in your accomplished way of organizing and structuring, the reading recommends, from what I can discern anyhow, that you find people who respect your work, all right? The idea that you could get discouraged to the point of depression or occupational resignation isn't a specific dynamic that I remember encountering, at least in the past period. But if you do in fact garner respect from those beneath you, as the reading claimed, and you're also modest, humble, and you cut an imposing physical presence with a down-to-earth approach, hey, you should be somewhere working for people that can give you one of the chief things that you derive fulfillment from, all right? At least in the job. I imagine that it applies to the social dynamics within the family and friendships too. But yeah, make sure you maintain your value, I would say. I love this recommendation here in the book for this, because I think this applies to just about everyone, but it sounds like for you it holds a special influence there. So pretty interesting. Let's see here. By and large, you come across, to me at least, by the reading, as someone who best flourishes when they evolve into their own unconventional person, which there may be a reason for here as we get along with the book as well. But the hardship that you'll endure, as I see it, is where you have to learn and grow within the system of convention before you can break from it. You know, a lot of times the book doesn't really cover things like that. They just say that person is this way right out the gate. But from what I was picking up on in the reading, you kind of have to evolve and struggle to find that. You would think that applies to everybody to some extent, but not necessarily, all right? Maybe not. They interview a lot of people for these different days, and then they kind of come down to a common denominator. And so I would say that must apply to quite a few people they interviewed, so could apply to you. That said, I would say all of this being taken into account, it's understandable you might have a little bit of mental anguish baked into the bargain, as they mentioned. So a lot of different things going on, A lot of evolving, figuring out your place, and then trying to buck with all that eventually so that you can find your final unconventional evolved form. Pretty interesting, I would say. That said, that's been what I had to say about the breakdown. Let's move on to your numbers and your planets. That's right, a little bit of astrology and numerology in the bargain. Let's see what they got. Those born on the 22nd of the month are ruled by the number 4, as 2 plus 2 equals 4, and by the planet Uranus, or Uranus, depending upon how you like to say it, which is both erratic and explosive. And because of this planet's combined influence with Mars and Venus, which are the rulers of Aries and Taurus, respectively, April 22nd, people must beware of using their power to control people through sexual and magnetic attraction. People ruled by the number 4 have unique methods and viewpoints, and because they so often take a minority point of view, yet remain fully self-assured, they sometimes arouse antagonism and can make enemies, often secret ones. And since 22 is a double number, people born on the 22nd day of the month often show an interest in doubles, twins, coincidences, symmetry, and the like. All right. Hey, they personalize this one for you a little bit. Kind of hard to avoid because of it's a cusp period, and we get into a lot of different dynamics at play. Here we got Mars and Venus, and then Uranus ruling over the top of them, influencing things, shaking things up. So they kind of had to personalize it for you. Not something they do all the time, but they do in no small part oftentimes. That said, probably burning down everything I had to say. Let's get back into the notes here. The number 4 and the explosive, erratic planet Uranus, often owing to a rebellious nature and not doing things in a straightforward fashion. All right. Co-rules with Mars with its god of war, masculine energy, and Venus with its nurturing, harmonious, feminine energy dynamics, both of which, when combined, promote a kind of balance, if you like. And when you combine both paradigms, that is. The reading claims you must be careful of using your magnetic sexual attraction, apparently. Let's see here, I'm losing my spot. Let's see, that's ostensibly comes with your imposing presence that they said that you have. Uranus typically has a kind of power that shakes up the energy dynamics of the planet that it co-rules with. And in this case, co-rules with dual planets here. So it's interesting that that this sexual magnetism was mentioned, because that hasn't been caught up for the past few days. Maybe once, I think, though it does say that there is that element of deriving pleasure from it, like more so than other folks, ostensibly. I don't know. They try to kind of stay away from that kind of thing, but they do mention it on occasion. So I would assume it interesting that that comes up. I'm thinking that Uranus might be upending that particular dynamic, and maybe it has more sway over you. So it's shaking up that dynamic a little bit. Who's to say? That's just a thought in my mind, because they seem to kind of drill down on it a little bit more here for you than they did in days previous. Kind of the point I'm trying to get to. But I'm more apt to think that Uranus shakes up your Mars-Venus balance by making you more magnetic. I think I just said that. But by extension, might provide you with these fortuitous outcomes that they say come your way. Who's to say? Kind of interesting. But which in no small part probably owes to number 4 unique viewpoints and methods also. You don't approach things in a straightforward fashion. And hey, maybe that's realized too for this other dynamic here. Potentially, no telling. But that said, it's, not stuff that they really drilled down into. So I thought I would advance it myself and maybe kind of put the ideas in your head. If those things, qualities do apply to you, hey, you know what? Maybe that's why. Who's to say? That said, that's been your numbers and your planets. Let's move on to your tarot. That's right, one of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies. Hey, it's here in the book. Sometimes it serves as a little bit of a metaphor that almost informs the breakdown. Not all the time, but sometimes. It's been kind of hit and miss the past couple weeks, but there have been a few that are hallmark cards, as I like to call them, because it seems like it's just the breakdown in a nutshell. So let's see what you got, and then we can just leave it in the book here. We don't have to go home and start dealing out the cards to, say, read our fortune or whatever. But here we go. The 22nd card of the major arcana is the Fool, who in several versions of the tarot is shown blithely stepping over the edge of a cliff. And some interpretations picture him as a foolish man who has given up on reason. Others, a highly spiritualized being free of material considerations. Positive meanings include renouncing resistance and following instincts freely. Foolishness, impulsiveness, and annihilation are the negative aspects. The highly evolved fool has followed life's path, experienced its lessons, and become one with his or her own vision. That sound like anybody we know based on the breakdown? I'd say it does, all right? I like this card for you, all right? And this isn't something that they just pick, oh, what's the best one to match up to this? No, it follows a cyclical cycle, so it's even more interesting when it speaks to the day. Here we go, what I had to say. The Fool, the spiritualized being free of material considerations, who has given up on reason for following instincts freely and renouncing resistance, the likes of which I would say lines up very nicely with the breakdown, all right? At least this aspect of your life by which you've realized and or evolved into your higher evolved form, all right? When you're following life's path and you're realizing your own vision. This kind of also leans right back into what I was saying about you've got to experience the suffering that comes with doing things that are uncomfortable. So sometimes it's just to help us realize what we don't want to do with the rest of our lives. And or you start facing that depression like they mentioned. I would say this lines up with that perfectly, all right? Where are we here? The reading says that the impulsiveness and annihilation works out for those lesser evolved individuals who don't recover from or stick with the situations that they've chosen for themselves, all right? So you don't want to stick with that job that's not fulfilling, right? You might just start a humdrum kind of existence. That came up the past few days as it happens. Interesting, it came up here today too. But they also say to seek the higher spiritual ends, as mentioned in the breakdown as well, all right? So there might be this materialism type facet that applies for a lot of folks, and they just can't get over that hurdle. It just, they let it define them to some extent. I don't know, who's to say? So they're suggesting again to kind of look for higher ideals to some extent, in no small part, if you like. But that said, like this thing lines up very nicely in my opinion. So perfect card for you, I would say, based on the breakdown. That said, that's been your tarot. Let's move on to your health. Here we go. Those born on April 22 may experience physical problems with the neck and the throat. And though they have a good voice for speaking or singing, the desire to develop this voice must be weighed against its vulnerability as an instrument, and care should be taken not to overdo it. Sex is very important to April 22 people, and whether engaged in it directly or sublimated into various forms of sensuality. Both giving and taking massages, for example, is a special source of delight. Those born on this day are rarely so happy as when they are in the kitchen. How about that? In the kitchen. And should allow themselves free rein and taste to experiment. A moderate amount of exercise is useful in combating weight gain, but overstrenuous exercise should be avoided. Well, all right. Hey, they said something about the kitchen. Look where we are. I didn't line that up. That's a rotation as well. So there's a little bit of synchronicity for you. I don't know. I get excited when that happens. Kind of dumb reason, but whatever. It's nice when it lines up. That said, I mentioned sex, didn't I? Hey, it popped up again. So I was almost like, well, why aren't we in the bedroom? But hey, that happens for other folks too. A lot of stuff has been lining up in this health speaks to the days previous as well. So it must be that Aries, Taurus, Cusp coming back into the dynamic. Again, probably burning everything down. Let's get into the notes here. Your neck and throat issues is said to be a potential issue they mentioned, which makes a lot of sense considering Aries and Taurus body areas. For the Aries, it was the head and the neck and the spine in no small part, I would say. So they often suggested get your chiropractic appointments, but they also said you got to mind tooth decay and headaches. And headaches made all the sense in the world considering how much stress they would put themselves under. It had to, metastasize in some way, I would say. But here for you, the voice that comes in, that's a Taurus body area. Also the ears, the stationary, the tubes they got in there. I can't remember how they're said, stationary tubes or whatever they're called. Also the palate, and what was the other one? The cerebellum, I believe, is the other one. So the headaches is still in there a little bit. But yeah, take care of your voice. Also the thyroid they mentioned. Why am I focusing on body areas so much? Aries was just an anomaly for the fact they seldom mention this stuff. I think there's 1 or 2 mentions. That's where I'm coming up with the chiropractic and everything. And the tooth decay. They barely made mention of it. They also would seldom mention specific foods for you to eat. I know they didn't do that here for you today, but once we shifted out of that Aries proper zodiac position and into this particular cusp, hey, they started bringing up foods again. Also, they related not to go strenuous with the exercise. Aries, by and large, if it did get mentioned, it was moderation, which is kind of surprising because most Mars rulerships, and Aries is ruled by Mars, they would get strenuous or vigorous exercise recommendations, but not for Aries. So, Mars was the dynamic in there, but it shifted out of it for some reason. Ostensibly because Aries are doers and they're getting their activity in when they're doing their normal intrinsic activities. So when it did come up, they said moderation. Here for you, they said stay away from strenuous. You know what? It might be that Uranus shaking up the Mars dynamic there, and it might not do you any favors, all right? That said, the mention of weight gain, I can't remember it coming up once during the Aries period, but as soon as we shifted into the cusp, it started becoming a thing. Ostensibly because there's a more sedentary type of job occupations for people coming out of the Aries period. No telling, but it's just an interesting anomaly and something to consider, all right? Again, they interviewed a lot of people, so it must apply. It must have applied in no small part. So just be mindful if it applies. Get a little bit of exercise in, but don't go too fast, too hard for too long. All right. And then sex apparently holds a special place in your heart there. All right. So like I said, we mentioned that already, despite being in the kitchen. All right. Though some folks do that for some reason. Anyway, getting a little too into the weeds with other things. Let's move on to some advice. All right. Some advice. Here we go. Beware of fascination with power. All right. Serve God or what is best inside you. Seek spiritual guidance and keep following your higher self. Remember your roots and don't lose yourself in advancement. Keep your modesty intact and cultivate humility. Oh, I like that last part. I'm huge on modesty and humility myself. That said, I had to write my notes here in the book because I ran out of space on the notepad. Bear with me if I get all jumbled up and stifled. Here we go. They said, beware of power fascination, all right? So serve God or what's best inside you, all right? So I said, lean towards your higher evolved final form. They might call that God or whatever. Hey, you know what? It's just that higher realization of yourself or the spiritual end there, if you like. Some folks follow religion. There you go. Pick your poison, all right? Follow your true voice and your higher idealized aspirations. Power trips breed antagonists as well, as we heard earlier. Those hidden enemies they mentioned. And antagonists is a common Aries issue, so we must be bleeding over with it. Even the nicest, warmest-hearted people, they would draw in a bunch of friends, and these were the kind of people who really didn't care about that too much. They just wanted to do their own thing. But they were warm enough towards them. That said, they drew up antagonism for people who were otherwise jealous from the sounds of it. That was the Aries 1 period. As they moved on, these people started getting too into the weeds with being over-involved with children and friends and the like, kind of telling them what to do and not necessarily reading the room to see those folks didn't need that in their lives. And they would get antagonists that way, all right? So antagonism still seems to be in the mix here, ostensibly. Why did they say here? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's got to be a mixture of the two, right? That said, beware of it because it might still apply. Too many things going on. There's hidden enemies. Let's see. Hence, seek spiritual guidance and that higher self, otherwise linked to common sense, I would say, all right? Considering the birthday breakdown elements that they went over, as well as the benefits of as much. They said, remember your roots, all right, and don't get lost in advancements, all right? You focus too much on career advancement, and other things are apt to fall by the wayside, things that are otherwise important to you, family, friends, or just the activities you like to do to decompress, all right? You might start getting stressed out too much, who's to say? But I also wrote here, lean in on what others love about you and your intrinsic natural allure, that magnetism that you have based on whatever particular influences, that physical presence where all the eyes cut to you in the room. What else do we have here? They said cultivate modesty and humility. All right. Ironically, that's exactly what was going through my mind as I was preparing the notes. I go through sentence by sentence and put things down. And then sure enough, hey, what did they write? Boom. I was like, okay, there we go. So they're qualities that endure you to people in a positive way, I would say. All right. Some others flourish and gain worship through taking themselves or from talking themselves up. So it's kind of it's a kind of posturing, right? Putting themselves like, yeah, I'm great in this role because of this and that and the other thing. And I would say that's from a more negative base, a little bit of too much pride in there. Not to say that it doesn't work, but if there's nothing behind it, it can't stand on its own 2 feet. All right. It comes apart in a stiff wind, I wrote here. And it also arouses antagonists. So we know that doesn't work for you. So don't poo the notion. You don't need to give that area of your life help, I would say, unless you want antagonists. Maybe there's got to be a draw to that for some folks, right? They like the challenge ostensibly. But I would say it's not your strength, okay? Lean in on your strengths. Considering you're not a full Mars individual also with a god of warlike energy, all right? I don't think it would work for you too well. Though, hey, you could probably pepper it in if you want, all right? Uranus likes to shake things up. Maybe you like a little bit of antagonism in your life. You like a challenge, perhaps, who's to say? In any event, that's what they had to say in the advice. I'm just getting off track here into the weeds on stuff that probably doesn't relate. Let's move on to your meditation. That's right. Let's shift down a couple of gears here, give you something to think about. Here we go. Seeing in the dark isn't done with one's eyes. Interesting. What could that mean? Seeing in the dark isn't done with one's eyes. All right. I've got no idea why they chose this one for you. Sometimes it comes to me when I hit it that second time. Not the case today. That said, even if I knew, you know what, it's your birthday, your meditation, it's just for you. I don't want to influence it one way or the other. So once again, seeing in the dark isn't done with one's eyes. All right. So that's been your meditation. Let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. Let's see where you got the girth, right? Or where you're otherwise maybe a little more atrophied in the bargain. Hey, let's see if we recognized any of these. Sometimes they surprise us with words I've never seen before, but let's get into it here. Your strengths, it says you're organized. Yeah, we picked up on that, I would say. Down to earth. Yep. And you're imposing. Interesting. That sounds like something that would be a weakness, but not here. It's a strength. All right. Imposing. But your weaknesses. Here we go. You only got two. You only got two here. You're difficult. I don't know that I picked up on that one so much. And you're materialistic. All right. Yeah, we heard this one a few times. All right. They're really drilling it home here for you. Oftentimes I like to say our strengths are going to help us overcome our weaknesses. All right. If they're even in the bargain that much, right? But I also like to say our weaknesses can be strengths in and to themselves. So let's try to make my case here. I may flounder, but let's go for it. How can your strengths help you overcome your weaknesses? You're organized, down to earth, and imposing. All right. Hey, you know what? Let's put the mirror up. We got to turn the dynamic that we put towards the world on ourselves. All right. You're organized. You're going to put your ducks in a row. I want to improve on this thing. What do I got to do to approach it? All right. Down to earth. You're going to pick the things that make the most sense. Get down to the foundations. You're not going to do the topical surface layer stuff. You're going to get down to the root of the problem and work in an organized fashion. No point in pulling the leaves off the weed if the root's just going to bring them back, right? You're also imposing. Hey, you might give yourself the hard talk. You're not going to poo-poo what needs to get done, all right? Just think about how you manage other people or you approach that job that you get done all too well, even though the boss doesn't like how you did it because he didn't do it his way. I know all too much about that, all right? You got to pick one, right? But if you're working on yourself, You can do what you like, right? You're the only one you got to answer to. So, in any event, your weaknesses, how can those be strengths? It says you're difficult, all right? Hey, you know what I say? That speaks to a certain amount of self-confidence, all right? We just got to be measured with it, not to come at it from a negative way. You know, all too often there's folks who don't like confrontation. They aren't going to say the things that are uncomfortable to say, especially if it's to power, all right? And I've encountered that all too often. It's not like my heart doesn't start getting beaten when you're in a confrontational thing, but you got to be the one that speaks up. I imagine that's not too hard for you. Also, hey, you know what? If you have a vision, I would say if you're difficult, you're going to make sure it gets seen or fulfilled to the best of your vision and not someone else's. All right. What else do we have here? Materialistic, they said. How can that be a strength? Hey, you know what? If you're in one of these jobs that's about aesthetics, like interior design, what else? Fashion. Hey, you need to have an eye for such things. And hey, if you're going to be selling Prada bags, hey, you probably ought to own a couple of them, right? That kind of thing. All right. So I would say that's important in those facets. But if you're just focused on acquiring things for acquiring things' sake, not going to help you, I would say. They were also saying in the advice to, what was it? I'm losing the plot here. Don't lose yourself in advancement. I would say that's where this comes in as a negative. But hey, with it as a strength, you've got to know how to identify the things that are going to help you advance through. Sometimes we need tools too, if you're a mechanic, to work on, dropping engines out or specialized things. But don't get them just to get them, all right? You're wasting money. It's not a good look, all right? Get them if you need them kind of thing. Now, I'm not making the best case, but I think you get where I'm coming at. That down-to-earth approach, all right? Get down to the root of it. So did I make the best case? I don't think I did too bad, despite the stifle there. But that said, I think you get the idea. Use your strengths to overcome your weaknesses. Hold up the mirror. But don't let your weaknesses get thrown in the trash altogether, because they're part of who you are, and they might serve as strengths. All right, you get the point. That said, that's been your strengths and your weaknesses. Let's move on to those born on this day. When we get into those born on this day, something I like to do is look at it from the perspective of figuring out a passion or a purpose in this life. Because I meet folks all too often who are basically just chasing the time clock, all right? They hit the alarm in the morning, roll out of bed so that they can get to work and punch a time clock, right? And then when the weekend comes, they're just rallying to do it all over again. Hey, I understand we got to feed ourselves and keep a roof over the head, but what if there was something more to grasp for, right? What if we could aim for a job where we were realizing our own fulfillment, so we're doing backflips out of bed in the morning, all right, to get into the job where there is no time clock, ostensibly. I think you get the point. The only problem is a lot of folks don't have that inclination, because there's times that it takes work and thought to figure out those things, not just do them, even if you've got to figure it out. So hopefully this can serve as inspiration for those who don't have a purpose to start getting after one, or at least thinking about what it could be, putting the time in to do the work to figure that out. If you got that figured out already, then the hat I'm not wearing's off to you. Let's just see who shares your company. Sometimes that can be interesting. So let's dive in here to those born on this day. We start off with Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher and responsible for the critique of pure reason. We also have Vladimir Lenin, Bolshevik, revolutionary, communist, ideologist, I'm saying that wrong for sure, Soviet Union founder. And hey, let's keep an eye on the day of established presence. Do these individuals have an established presence? Immanuel Kant and Vladimir Lenin? For sure, I would say. Who else has an established presence? We have Alexander Kurnatsky, a Russian revolutionary leader, a writer of Prelude to Bolshevism. And it says, proclaimed Russian Republic, seized power, and he was toppled by Lenin. All right, there we go. Also a Paris editor, and died at the age of 89 in America. A lot on that gentleman. We also have Robert Oppenheimer, all right, a nuclear physicist, I said that one right, and the A-bomb father and head institute of advanced study at Princeton. We also have Jack Nicholson, the film actor, established presence. Charles Mingus, jazz bassist, composer. Don't know that I've ever heard of anything from him, but I've heard of him, established presence. We also have Yuhindi Manahuan, violinist, conductor, sure I'm saying that wrong, Rita Montalcini, an Italian-American Nobel Prize-winning neurobiologist, and it says nerve growth factor is what they're responsible for. David Cram, a U.S. Nobel Prize-winning chemist and responsible for synthetic molecule study. Kathleen Ferrier, British mezzo-soprano. Bai Yang, Chinese stage and film actress. Ellen Glasgow, a novelist of They Stooped to Folly. Peter Frampton, a singer-songwriter, guitarist too, I believe, right? Famous for the talk box, established presence. I think that's him, who's to say. Glenn Campbell, singer-songwriter, another notable guitarist. We have MME and Louise de Stael, French novelist and a critic. Odell Redden, French symbolist painter. Aaron Spelling, a TV producer. Dean Beeman, a PGA commissioner, and introduced stadium golf. And it says, finally, Sidney Nolan, an Australian painter. Well, all right. A lot of established presence. You know what? Maybe more so fit and form for the person and the title of the day than a lot of other birthdays I've seen. Interesting. That said, I mucked up a ton of names. So let's make up for it on my side of things. It's not done in malice. I just butcher because Hooked on Phonics doesn't often work for me. That said, that essentially rounds out your birthday reading, all right? So if there's anything I can wish for you on your birthday, it's that you're chasing after a passion, all right? I know that the book's been written, so you're not probably going to be getting into it. But hey, you know what? I would still say the field of play is wide open for you to leave your mark. That said, your season is spring. Your sign, once again, is Taurus of the Aries-Taurus cusp. And your quality and element is fixed earth. What does that mean? I'll leave some videos at the end. There's also links in the description if you want to explore those, dive in further. So it explains all that. But this has been April 22nd, the day of established presence, from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Used Elfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description right above a personal message I like to put together for the birthday boys and girls. So if you're interested in checking out either of those, give it a look-see. This book makes an excellent icebreaker to throw out for those social occasions that it says you put together and organize. Hey, if you want to find a way to crack the ice in an inventive, non-traditional, non-conformist way, which I imagine you do because you're number 4, boom, throw the book out. Get the conversation started for better or for worse, all right? That said, book having been related, that's not what's important here. Like I said at the top, what's important here, wishing you a happy birthday. So you heard it here once again. Happy birthday, all right? And for everybody else who joined us to celebrate, hey, I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and we see you for your birthday reading, all right? That said, once again, here at the top, get out there, let the universe show you it's on with you on your path, all right? You're 1 and you're 4 for a 5, or whatever you roll for yourself. Pick up on some synchronicity. Open your eyes. Drop the blinders, all right? Maybe you might see some magic. I hope you do, all right? If there's anything else I can wish for you on your birthday. That said, hey, let your harmony guide you, all right? And don't be too materialistic in the bargain, all right? Enjoy yourself. Find time to relax, even though it sounds like you already know how to do that while you're working. Like I said, that doesn't come up very often. Huge, okay? But hey, you get it. We said enough already, okay? But once again, happy birthday. Take care of yourselves.